What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, now this, believe it or not, is pretty much my redemption video. Okay, so I dropped one of these last year and for some reason I got a lot of hate on it. It's probably because I was ugly, and you know what, I'll take it, you know, I'm a man. But this video ended up getting 500 dislikes, and like it got more dislikes than likes, which is really uncommon for a double ISY. And so I figured I would redo this video and kind of do it as well as I can and do a better job. In case you guys will know, I listen to your comments, alright? And I try to take in all criticism, so you know what, I'm gonna learn from my mistakes. I wish I could relate that to my personal life because I'm still overweight, I haven't lost it. And that phone is the LG V20. So the V20 is one of those phones that I really never used, you know, I'll be honest. I mean, I didn't use it as a main device. Obviously I used it, I've owned 2 of them already, but LG is one of those companies that I have a long history with. I used to use the LG G2, which came out at like from 2011 or 2012, and I used that as a main phone from like 2014 to 2015-ish, or 2015 to 2016, something like that. And I used it for about a year and a half, and I have a lot of love for that phone. Even though there were a lot of problems with it and different things like that, I still have so much love for it. And that was pretty much the second LG phone I ever owned. The first one was the Nexus 4, and so I have a long history of LG phone ownership or whatever. And the V20, when I owned it and when I had it, I'm like, you know what, this phone could have the potential of being a very, very good phone. Then I started doing some research, I made my own assumption, and I think I'm ready to do this, man. So the V20 came out in 2016 in September, so this year it'll turn 3 years. It's about 2.5 now, closer to 2 years, but you know, it's not that old at all. And looking around the body, I'll be honest, okay, I still don't think this thing feels extremely premium, alright? I don't think that's changed at all, but I don't think it feels extremely cheap either, you know? I think it definitely has a time and place. You have the fingerprint sensor on the back, and you have kind of the USB Type-C as well, a headphone jack, and I'll be honest, the one interesting aspect that kind of differentiates this phone versus other phones would be the top panel. It has like an extra little panel up top, and that's actually super uncommon for a phone, man. And I think personally that kind of brought a lot of information to your face. And you know what, last year I said whether if it was IPS or OLED, I wish it was preferred OLED, and I still kind of feel like that. I wish LG kind of put an OLED panel up there, or just an OLED panel overall, but I don't think that's a deal breaker. I mean, if they're keeping it kind of separate, even though that panel is always on, it's whatever, you know, to each their own. And overall, I mean, I think the panel looks pretty nice. I do think, I don't know why, this panel does not look as good as the LG G6's panel. The G6 had a pretty good panel on it, even though it was IPS. IPS isn't horrible. I think there's a lot of good IPS panels out there, but the V20, the colors just seem a little washed out. I don't know. I try to give it my best shot or whatever, but looking at it now compared to what we have, even though the resolution is high, it's the 1440p we're used to, I think the panel just doesn't look as good as it could be. So there's that. I'm not hating on it, that's just my opinion. And this thing also has a removable battery, which is actually pretty interesting. You have to like click a little side button and you're able to take the battery out, and so that's really cool. So that's actually a super cool thing, and I love that. Whenever we can get that in a phone, I freaking love that. Now that kind of hits on everything from the outside of the phone. A dual camera setup on the back, super cool. They kind of future-proof that phone there, and I'll get into the camera in a second. But looking at the software, so this thing started off with Android Nougat, which was 7.0, and right now, as of right now, it's upgradable to Android 8.0, but I'm pretty sure it's going to get Android Pie at some point of its life cycle. I mean, I'm assuming, because this one has only gotten 2 versions of Android so far. So what I'm saying is, whether it's confirmed or not, I would still probably recommend to custom ROM this thing, and the reason being, I mean, obviously if you're comfortable with it, or you can just keep it until Pi comes out, but when I owned my LG G2, I custom ROMmed it, and I almost always used it on a custom ROM, and it just brought so much more life into the phone, and it made my phone feel like a 5-year-old phone to feeling like a 2-year-old phone, or you know, not as old, basically still old phone, but not as old. And this one is, and I'm sure with the V20 it's no exception. Now, if I was planning on using this device as my main device, then I would totally custom ROM it, but because I'm not planning on using this as my main phone, so I kept it stock to kind of show you guys what it's going to be like if you were to keep it stock. And I guess in terms of the software, LG kind of has this weird thing where they bloat their software a lot. They have a lot of unnecessary features in it, in my opinion. And before, I'll be honest, when the G2, G3 were out, the software was pretty solid. Their UI was really clean, but now, I mean, I don't know what they did with it. When I owned the G7 and G6, it just seems like they're just trying to do this thing where it's like TouchWiz, but not really. So I don't really like it that much, but you might like it, so there's that. Now that kind of hits on everything right there, okay? That kind of hits on the software and how this phone feels and looks. But kind of moving on, this is where I'm going to lose some people. The performance is one of those things where, I'll be honest, I actually kind of like it, okay? You might be surprised. It has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 processor, a quad-core CPU, Adreno 530 GPU, and 4 gigs of RAM. So what I'll tell you is, this phone, in terms of the specifications, is solid. It seems okay, you know, it doesn't seem like it's above and beyond. We have phones with like 8 gigs of RAM now, but that's totally overkill. I'll say for the LG V20, in terms of day-to-day performance, like whether you're just multitasking, opening Google Sheets, or texting people, whatever, you're going to have a pretty decent time with it. I really don't think it's slow at all. I think the screen is pretty big, and I have smaller hands, so it's kind of hard to maneuver. But I think, you know, in terms of just keeping the apps in the background and everything, it's totally solid. I think it will definitely take you from point A to point B, and I really don't have too many complaints with just the way this phone overall performs at all. I don't think there's any problem with it. Maybe the small thing I might have an issue with is just kind of the frame rates, like I guess the animation speeds. Sometimes if I go into multitasking or I kind of close out, it seems like a little choppiness is going around, but it's not that big of a deal. If you can kind of get over it, then that's it. I don't want to offend anybody. But I think overall, I mean, just the way this phone, I guess, performs in terms of the UI is decent enough to kind of give it a good rating. Now, the one thing I kind of want to hit on is the gaming. So the way this phone is set up in terms of performance, I would assume it would have played all these games perfectly fine, but it really kind of had a little glitchiness here and there. In terms of casual gaming, obviously it's going to run fine. It has pretty decent specs, and iPhone 4S can run Temple Run perfectly fine. So all these types of games are going to run fine, so I'm not going to kind of hit on it too much there. But in terms of the heavier intensive games like Real Racing 3 and other games like that, it does kind of show its age a little bit, which is interesting because this phone isn't even that old and it's already showing a little bit of glitchiness. And I'll give you an example. I had the Galaxy S8 and that phone came out in 2017, just a couple months after this actually, and that phone ran perfectly fine on Real Racing 3. And obviously that phone was kind of in a different category. It was extremely premium, had a lot of different crazy things for it, but nonetheless, I feel like if that phone could have ran a Real Racing 3 perfectly fine, then I feel like the LG V20 could have done the same thing. So in terms of the gaming aspect, the heavier intensive, you might run into some issues here and there, but I don't think it's the end of a deal or anything. I don't think it's like a deal breaker in my opinion. So with overall performance, I'll give it maybe like a 7.5 out of 10, 8 out of 10. When you factor in everything considered, especially the fact that I don't want to offend anybody. Now moving on to the camera. Now this is interesting because it has a dual camera setup on the back, and usually with dual cameras that I've seen, they have the same kind of camera on both sides, but this time they actually didn't. So they have the 16 megapixel sensor as the main sensor. It has optical image stabilization, laser autofocus, cool things. But the secondary lens is 8 megapixels, so half the megapixel count doesn't really matter. What that secondary lens allows you to do is not only, I guess, unlock a bunch of new features, but it allows you to shoot ultra wide photos and videos or whatever the case is. And that's actually super, super cool. That's such a nice feature. It kind of gives you that fisheye lens. And I think I saw the same thing with the G5, and that is so unbelievably cool. I wish iPhones could do that. I think maybe the XS Max could do it now, I don't remember, but I wish iPhones could do that with their dual lens setup instead of just being able to zoom in twice as much. I think that's a really, really cool little feature. We're also able to shoot 4K videos on it at 30 frames per second and 1080p videos and all these other frame rates too. So you're really not going to run into too many problems in terms of the camera quality overall. I think it's a really good camera, and even the front facing camera, it's 5 megapixels. Honestly, I wish it could have been better. I think that might be another thing where it's kind of lacking at. But overall, I mean, it gets the job done. I guess it's whatever. So overall, I would rate the camera. I'll give it a thumbs up. You know, I like it. There's really nothing to hate on it. I guess this phone, looking at it now after using it more, there's really not too much to hate on it, I'll be honest. Except for something that I'll get into in a second. You guys are not going to like that. But now moving on, in terms of the battery life, this thing has a 3,200 milliamp hour battery. And in terms of the stock battery itself, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's horrible. It gets the job done. I would probably, if I took my daily usage on my iPhone 10 and brought it to the V20, I would probably end the day, I would probably have to charge it before the end of the day before it would die, honestly. I don't think it's a horrible battery life, but that's kind of what it is. But this LG V20 has a humongous advantage, and that is the fact that it has a removable battery. So you can go remove the battery, swap it out. Literally, if you have an extra battery in your pocket, go swap it out, you're good. And this is, I guess this is mostly important, I guess, from day-to-day usage, obviously, as well. But if you're going hiking, this is like a pretty good example. And let's say, I mean, you're going hiking, you're not going to bring a charger with you unless you bring a portable charger. But instead of bringing a huge block and wires, you can just bring an extra battery, swap it out, and you're good to go. So that's a really, really cool thing. I would always rather prefer having a removable battery than not having it at all. So that's a pretty big thing right there. And that pretty much sums up this whole entire phone. Now there's some other crazy things I have to mention. This thing also has a micro SD card slot, which is amazing. There's no phones being released now. Well, there's some, but like for the most part, there's very few phones in the market that still have the micro SD card slot. So that is a super amazing thing that this thing still has it. Now, of course, I don't think they're still making it anymore. But the fact that it has it is super cool, and I have a lot of respect for LG for doing that. Another interesting thing is that this thing's sound quality is apparently super awesome. It has a DAC, whatever that is. I didn't really look into it that much. But apparently the sound quality from this is super good. I listened to some of my songs from here, and I guess it does kind of sound good or sound better than my iPhone 10. But it doesn't sound like it's the craziest thing ever, so it could just be me, could just be my songs. I don't know, and obviously this phone is pretty massive, and overall, man, I'll tell you, I like this phone, but there's one thing I have to mention. I hate saying it, but This phone was one of the phones that kind of suffered from the LG boot looping issue, and even though a lot of people watching this might be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, my phone doesn't suffer from it, whatever, I personally had my LG G2 suffer from that. I sound like I have a disease. My LG G2 suffered from that, and I know it exists 100%. With the V20, it was a little bit less of an outcry. Apparently not as people had it on their phone. It was mostly the G5, the G3, G4, all those phones right there. And the V20 had it to some extent. So I really have to factor that in to determine whether it is still worth it now in 2019. But what I'll tell you is, if you're an LG V20 owner, I want you to tell me your experience. I want you to tell me how you feel about this phone right now. Do you still like owning it? Do you have a good time owning it? And I think that would persuade a lot of people in the comments of whether they should buy it or whether they shouldn't, because in my opinion, I don't think I've owned it long enough to make that opinion. I'm only presenting you with what I know. But what I will say is that I don't think it's a horrible phone. If you get one that works, then keep it. Kind of do a little bit more research about the boot looping issue, but I think as it is right now with my working unit, it seems perfectly fine. I would probably give it like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, which is pretty high for me. I don't think it's a horrible phone at all. I think it's on the better side for sure. But again, as like any other double I do, I always try to list some competitors that I think are around the same price category too. And I think not only the LG V20 is a good phone, but the Galaxy S8, I think that's a pretty strong contender. That's only a little bit more expensive than this phone. And I think the Google Pixel XL, the original one, all those three phones are super awesome. And the Galaxy S8 and Google Pixel XL are very good competitors to this phone. And so going one step further, I'll go ahead and find the cheapest V20s, Galaxy S8s, and Google Pixel XLs on Amazon. I'll go ahead and link them straight in the description below. So if you're interested in picking either one of those phones up, go ahead and do it. They're linked straight below, and make sure you get in through that link so you can actually help support the channel at the same time, and you can help us make more videos like this and do more giveaways and things like that. So it don't mean so much if you guys could do that, but that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I would really appreciate if you guys could check it out, but more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.